I do find those bits quite revealing. I think, that's what it would be like to hang out with her if you were lucky enough as David Attenborough is to hang out with her.
Well, Kevin, congratulations on the new film, the new documentary, Elizabeth, A Portrait in Parts. It was absolutely beautiful. What made you want to make this film about Queen Elizabeth?
Well, it was something that came about with my old friend and collaborator, Roger Michelle, who's now sadly no longer with us. But it was a lockdown project to start with. We were figuring we couldn't make a normal movie like we used to do every year or so because of the studios being closed. And so Roger came up with the idea of doing an archive documentary about the Queen. And to be honest, I was a little skeptical, not about the archive documentary, but about whether we could make a film about the Queen that felt different and fresh and original. And so that was the idea we kicked around for a few days. But I have to say, I hope we achieved our aim anyway.
You definitely did.
Yes, I thought it was so interesting and such a unique way to present all the information. Was there any really interesting footage, or what was the most interesting, footage that you were able to pull from the archives?
Well, it's so hard to say because, there's over 90 years of it, isn't there? I mean, the oldest piece of footage in that film is 90 years old. And I don't know, I think sometimes it was the surprising things that you hadn't seen before, like the visit to Germany, the visit to Dresden. I'd never seen that footage before. I love all the horse racing stuff, and we know here in England that the Queen loves her horses, but, seeing her at the races and just being able to put together that sequence of her over the years going horse racing was a real thrill. And it still makes me smile every time I see it, that sequence.
I totally agree with you. When she's running back and forth from inside to outside, I love that. And like when I haven't worn binoculars in so long. I feel like that's where you see her most, like what I would imagine is herself behind closed doors and, having those carefree moments. Did you feel that as well?
I think so. It's so hard, isn't it? Because she is the most public and famous woman in the world in many, many ways. And yet, she's managed to maintain this extreme privacy behind closed doors. And we only get these glimpses. I mean, I think part of the way our film works is because the glimpses are kind of piled in a pretty concentrated fashion. You do, by the end, I hope, get some sort of insight into the kind of person she is. And I think what really does come across is her sense of humor. I really come away from it feeling she's got a wonderfully wry sense of humor. And clearly she has to use that to cope with some of the rather tedious things she has to do in her official position. So, but I enjoyed that.
Oh, yes. You say that the way you've sort of laid it out, where the themes are sort of back to back so you can get, a grasp of the theme. How did you decide, which themes and chapters to focus on?
Well, it sort of came hundreds of hours of archive and things started to kind of gravitationally attract to one another. So horses, prime ministers, the war, and then once the chapters started to form, then we could go back to the archive team and say, have you got any more tribal dancing? Or have you got any more hands with prime ministers or, whatever it might be? And so that was kind of how the process of making the film occurred.
I was just thinking of the millions and millions of hands she must have has shaken over the years.
Well, in fact, that idea of the sort of montage of handshakes, which ends the film now, that was a very early idea of Roger's, that we would have a sequence where you would just see her shake hands with 50 people, and cut very tightly. I mean, what we didn't in reverse order and make it the end of the film, but I think it works really well.
Yeah. In his notes, Roger said that the Queen is fiction, but she lives. Is that how you wanted to show a different side of her, but also have that mysteriousness as well?
Well, I think that's the thing. She is an enigma, isn't she? And yet she's among us. I mean, without wanting to sound quasi-religious about it. But, I mean, it is an extraordinary thing that she's both something that's, very, very familiar and yet very, very unknown. And I suppose that's sort of what the film wants to investigate a bit as well. The idea that she is the Sphinx, she is the Mona Lisa. You know, she's this icon, and yet what do we really know? Apart from the fact she works really hard and you know, has done this job so brilliantly for 70 years.
As you were going through the archives and sort of searching through these, you know, clips, when do you think you saw the true Elizabeth? You know, when were we really seeing her true self?
Gosh, I don't know. I think there's so many little glimpses, and you have to make your own assembly, don't you, of those glimpses? I mean, I think there's some rather touching stuff of her as a young mum, you know, with Charles, you know, when she's first presenting some of the kids to the cameras for the first time. I think the racing section says a lot about her. I think actually some of the stuff with David Attenborough I found rather charming, because they're born in the same year and they're pretty much exact contemporaries, and their work has obviously brought them into contact with one another a few times. So I do find those bits quite revealing. I think, you know, that's what it would be like to hang out with her if you were lucky enough, as David Attenborough is, to hang out with her.
Hey everyone, I'm Christina Garibaldi, the host of Us Weekly Celebrity Coverage. Don't forget to hit subscribe for the latest celebrity news, tips, and video. And for much more content, make sure you head on over to usmagazine.com, the official home of Us Weekly Magazine.